Sir, hold up. I need to ask you something.
Okay, what's going on, officer?
Whose child is this?
She's my daughter.
You're telling me that's your kid?
I can show you my ID if you...
Don't reach for anything. Keep your hands where I can see them. You can't be her dad. Look at you. So where'd you get her from? I won't ask again.
Sir, stop right there. Those 3 words stopped everything. The ducks, the laughter, the entire Saturday afternoon gone. Replaced by a uniform, a hand on a holster, and a question so loaded it hit like a slap before it even finished leaving the officer's mouth. Whose child is that? The man being asked was Deshaun Calloway, 34 years old, high school history teacher, father. The little girl gripping his hand was his 6-year-old daughter, Camille. Blonde hair, hazel eyes, freckles across her nose. And in the mind of Officer Brett Simmons, she didn't belong to him. Not because of any evidence, not because of any report, not because of any tip, but because of how they looked standing next to each other. And that assumption, that single, unchecked, unverified assumption, was about to cost one officer his badge, one city $2.4 million, and one little girl something that no settlement check could ever fully give back. Now, before we go any further, if you are new here, welcome to Life or Death Bodycam. This channel exists for one reason: to make sure stories like this one don't disappear. Stories about real people, real rights, and real consequences. We are working toward 1,000 subscribers, and if you believe accountability should have an audience, hit that subscribe button right now. It is right below this video. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to keeping this channel alive. Subscribe now, and then stay with me, because what happens next in this story is something you need to see all the way through. Stay with me through this one, because what this bodycam captures isn't just one bad day at a park. It's a case study in how fast bias becomes brutality when nobody stops to ask for proof before reaching for cuffs. It was a Saturday in early March, one of those rare fall days where the sky is so clear it feels like the city is showing off. Deshaun and Camille had been at Riverside Park for about 40 minutes. They'd fed the ducks at the lower pond. They'd raced each other to the picnic bench, and Camille had won, mostly because Deshaun let her. He bought her a lemonade from the vendor cart near the east entrance, and she'd knocked half of it over laughing at a story he was telling, and neither of them cared even a little bit. By all measures, it was a nothing day. A perfect nothing day. The kind parents remember years later, and kids don't know to appreciate until they're grown. Deshaun was pushing Camille on the swings when he noticed the patrol car. It had pulled slowly into the park service lane, the kind of deliberate roll that police do when they're looking for something specific. He didn't think much of it. Parks have patrols. He pushed Camille higher, and she screamed in delight. Then the car stopped. The officer got out, and he walked directly toward them. "Sir, stop right there." Deshaun slowed the swing to a gentle stop and turned around, both hands already visible without being asked. A reflex, not from guilt, but from experience. From the conversations his father had with him. From the conversations he knew he'd eventually have with Camille. "What's going on, officer?" Officer Brett Simmons was 6 years into his career. He had received no unusual briefings that morning. No report of a missing child in the park. No Amber Alert active in the county. Nothing from dispatch had directed him toward this family. What directed him here, as confirmed later by his own bodycam audio, was what he described to his partner as a visual discrepancy. His exact words: "Something just didn't add up." "Whose kid is that?" Simmons asked, nodding toward Camille. Deshaun blinked once. "She's mine. That's my daughter." The officer looked at Camille, then back at Deshaun. His expression said everything before his mouth did. "Yeah," he replied slowly. "Yours?" "Yes." Camille had gone still on the swing the way children do when they feel the air in a room change, even if they can't name why. Her small hand reached up and found her father's wrist. "Daddy," she whispered. The officer stepped closer. "I'm gonna need you to prove that." Deshaun stayed calm, measured, the kind of calm that isn't free. It costs something to maintain. "Of course," he said. He reached toward his jacket pocket. "Don't reach for anything. Keep your hand where I can see them." Deshaun held both palms out, open, level. "I'm going for my wallet. My ID is inside." "Do it slowly." He did. Slowly withdrew the wallet. Removed his driver's license. Held out flat. Simmons took it, looked at it, then looked at Camille, then back at the license. Then back at Camille again. "Her last name," Deshaun said calmly, "is Calloway. Same as mine." The officer read the ID a second time. Set his jaw. "You got proof she's yours?" "Proof of what?" "That this child belongs to you." And there it was. That framing. Not verify, this isn't a missing person situation. Not confirm guardianship. Prove this child belongs to you. As if parenthood itself required authentication, depending on who was making the claim. We're at the park, Deshawn said evenly. I didn't bring a filing cabinet. The officer's face hardened. Where's her mother? At work. Doing what? She's a pharmacist. Uh-huh. Simmons scanned the park slowly, like he was conducting surveillance. And she's okay with you bringing the kid out here? Deshawn looked at him steadily. She's my daughter. I don't need permission to take my own child to a park. Simmons stepped closer, noticeably inside, arm's length now. Close enough that Camille shifted and pressed herself against Deshawn's leg without being told to. The officer crouched down to her eye level. Hey, sweetheart. What's your name? Camille, she said, barely above a whisper. Camille what? Calloway. He stood back up, eyes narrowing. Where do you live? Deshawn answered. Gave the street, the neighborhood. Simmons didn't write any of it down, because he wasn't gathering information. He was burning time while his conclusion stayed fixed. At this point, 7 people in the immediate area had noticed the interaction. 3 of them had already raised their phones. Not because anyone organized it, not because anyone sent a signal, but because tone alone tells a story, and this story had a familiar shape that too many people recognized. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Your city, your state, your country, wherever you are watching from tonight. Because this story deserves to travel, and I want to see exactly how far it goes. Simmons took a half step back, then said the words that made a woman near the nearest bench audibly gasp. I'm going to need you to turn around. I'm detaining you on suspicion of possible child abduction pending guardian verification. Child abduction, Deshawn repeated. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step back. He held Camille's hand tighter and said clearly, I am her father. That's what they all say. That sentence right there. That is the one that tells you everything about where this officer's head was. Not I need to confirm that. Now let me call it in. That's what they all say. Meaning the decision had already been made. Meaning the ID didn't move him. Meaning the matching last name didn't move him. Meaning Camille calling him daddy hadn't moved him. The conclusion was written before the first word was spoken, and everything since was just noise he was choosing not to hear. Deshawn kept both hands visible. I'm not resisting anything, but I'm telling you clearly, this is my child. The officer circled slightly. You mixed, right? He said to Camille. Flat, like a neutral observation. Deshawn's jaw tightened. Her mother is white. I'm black. That's how biology works. Simmons almost smiled. I've seen this play before. This play. He used the word play, as if a father taking his daughter to the park on a Saturday was a scheme. A performance. Outgoing. Camille looked up at Deshawn, eyes wide and beginning to fill. Daddy, what is he doing? It's okay, Cam. He squeezed her hand. We're going to clear this up. But it wasn't clearing up, because Simmons was already reaching for his radio. And Camille, 6 years old, standing there in her yellow jacket with the butterfly patch on the sleeve, started to cry. Turn around, Simmons said. Hands behind your back. I want to know the specific probable cause. I told you. Suspicion of child abduction. Based on what evidence? Based on the visual discrepancy between the child and the adult. That sentence was caught clean on Bodycam. Verbatim. And it would later become the centerpiece of a federal civil rights lawsuit. Because visual discrepancy is not probable cause. It never has been. It never will be. And a 6-year veteran of law enforcement either knew that and didn't care, or didn't know it and had no business carrying a badge. Deshawn turned slowly, hand behind his back, compliant, because he understood, as a black man in America, that compliance was sometimes the only survival strategy available, even when the injustice was absolute. He turned around for an officer who had no cause to cuff him, on a charge that didn't exist, in front of his daughter. The cuffs clicked shut. Camille screamed, Daddy! No, he didn't do anything. That's my daddy. Her voice tore through the park. Birds scattered from a nearby tree. A woman near the fountain grabbed her own child by instinct and turned toward the sound. Phones already recording zoomed in tighter. Because now it wasn't just a tense conversation between a man and an officer. Now there were restraints. Now there was a child in full panic. Now there was something everyone watching recognized as deeply, fundamentally wrong. Simmons put a hand on Deshawn's arm and began walking him toward the cruiser. You're scaring my daughter, Deshawn said. His voice was remarkable in that moment. Steady, not broken, not pleading, just stating a fact the way you state facts when you have no other power left. Simmons replied without looking at him. You should have thought about that. That sentence made a woman near the picnic area say, oh my God, loud enough for the Bodycam microphone to pick it up clearly. Camille ran after them, her small sneakers on the gravel path, her arms reaching forward. A bystander, a woman who had been eating lunch nearby, caught her gently before she reached the cruiser. She knelt down and whispered that it was going to be okay, but she knew it wasn't, and everyone standing in that park knew it wasn't. Deshaun was placed against the squad car. He looked back over his shoulder toward his daughter and said the most important thing he could say in that moment. He said it calm. He said it clear. Called her mother. Her name is Dominique Calloway. She works at the Riverside Pharmacy on 5th Avenue. This will take 5 minutes to resolve. 5 minutes. Simmons opened the rear door of the cruiser. Save it. Deshaun sat in the back seat and did something that took more strength than anything else he did that day. He did not fall apart. He breathed slowly. He kept his face visible through the window to where Camille was standing because even cuffed, even accused, even publicly humiliated in front of strangers on a Saturday afternoon, he was still her father. And he was not going to let the last thing she saw be fear on his face. Outside, Camille was still screaming. Her voice had taken on that specific texture that only belongs to children in genuine crisis. Not a tantrum, not frustration. Pure terror. Let him go. He's my daddy. He didn't take me. I live with him. He's my dad. Every word on camera. Every word clean and audible. And not a single word coach, because there was no time to coach her, no reason to coach her, and nothing about the way she said it that sounded like anything other than a 6-year-old girl telling the truth in the only language available to her. Backup arrived. A second patrol unit pulled into the lot. 2 officers stepped out and read the scene before saying a word, the way experienced officers do when they walk into something that feels off. One of them, Officer Dana Reyes, looked at Camille first, then at Deshaun in the back of the cruiser, then at Simmons. What's the situation? She asked. Possible abduction. Adult male, child doesn't match. Reyes looked at Camille again. She's calling him dad. Simmons shrugged slightly. Could be coached. Reyes's expression shifted in a way that wasn't subtle. She looked at Simmons the way people look at someone when they are trying to decide if they heard what they think they just heard. She walked closer to the cruiser and looked through the rear window at Deshaun, sitting cuffed in the back seat. Then she turned back to Simmons. Did you run the ID? Yes. And? Names match. So what is the hold? Simmons said, it could be planned. Reyes looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, have you called the mother? He didn't answer. Because he hadn't. He had not called the mother. He had not run family records. He had not contacted school enrollment. He had not done a single thing to verify the claim beyond reading a driver's license and then deciding the matching last name wasn't convincing enough. He had taken a man's freedom in a public park in front of that man's child based entirely on a look. And now there were cuffs on an innocent father, and a child sobbing against a stranger's jacket, and 6 civilian cameras running without interruption alongside the body cam that was recording every second. Then the silver Prius came in fast, tires loud on the pavement, a stop that was more urgency than parking. The car doors swinging open before the engine noise finished dying. The woman who stepped out was still wearing her pharmacy vest. Her work badge was still clipped to the front pocket because she had left so fast she hadn't thought to take it off. Her name was Dominique Calloway, 31 years old, licensed pharmacist, and the way she moved across that parking lot, fast, direct, controlled, was the specific energy of a woman who is furious and has not yet decided how much of it to show. Mama! Camille screamed. She broke from the bystander and ran straight into her mother's arms. Dominique caught her, held her, pressed her lips to the top of her head, and in the same motion looked up and saw her husband sitting cuffed in the back of a police cruiser. Her face moved through 5 emotions in the span of 2 seconds. The last one settled into something colder and quieter than anger. She stood up. She walked directly toward Simmons. Fast and controlled. Why is my husband in handcuffs? Ma'am, step back. Don't ma'am, step back me. My husband is in your car. What is the charge? Pending investigation. Pending investigation of what? What happened? Simmons straightened slightly. Your husband was seen with a child that is my daughter. She held Camille slightly out in front of her. That is our daughter. Look at her. She has his eyes. She has his nose. She has my coloring. She is our child. Do you have identification? Dominique let out a short breath that was almost a laugh. Yes, she said. She reached into her pharmacy vest and produced her work badge, her driver's license, and her phone unlocked to the screensaver, a photo of Deshaun, Dominique, and Camille at a birthday party, Camille in a paper crown, all 3 of them mid-laugh. I also have her marriage license, the birth certificate, and pediatric record in my car. Because apparently when your husband is black, you need to drive around prepared to prove your family is real. That line dropped across the park like something heavy into still water. Officer Reyes looked down at the ground. Simmons's jaw tightened. That's not what this is about. It is exactly what this is about, Dominique said. She stepped past him toward the cruiser window, so Deshawn could see her. I have everything, she said through the glass. He nodded once. Calm. Certain. Because the truth had just pulled into the parking lot, and the pressure was about to shift completely. Simmons keyed his radio, requesting supervisor on scene. That call, that request, was the first real crack in his confidence. Because officers don't call supervisors when they believe in their arrest. They call supervisors when they know what they've done is going to require explaining. Sergeant Patricia Okafor arrived in 11 minutes. No lights, no sirens. She parked, stepped out, and took in the entire scene before she moved toward anyone. The way 22 years on the force teaches you to read a situation before you insert yourself into it. Phones up everywhere. Crowd gathered 3 deep. Child in her mother's arms, still crying. Man cuffed in the back of a cruiser. One officer standing slightly stiff, like someone who has already rehearsed his explanation and isn't fully confident in it. Okafor walked to Simmons first. Brief me. He told his version. Visual discrepancy. Protective instinct. Pending verification. She nodded once. Then she looked toward the cruiser. Then toward Dominique. Then back at Simmons. Guardian is present? Dominique stepped forward immediately. I am. And that is my husband you have in restraints. Ma'am, do you have documentation? I have everything. Can I see it? Dominique went to her car. She came back with a folder. Thick. Organized. She had assembled it years ago. Not because she ever imagined a moment exactly like this one, but because she had always understood that the burden of proof in her family fell differently than it did in other families. She had prepared for a moment she hoped would never come. Okafor opened the folder. Birth certificate. Hospital delivery records. Family insurance paperwork. Pediatric visit records listing Deshawn as father. School enrollment forms. And photographs, 23 of them, birthdays, holidays, a beach trip, a first day of school, a random Tuesday dinner. A family documented across 6 years of ordinary life. Okafor closed the folder. She turned toward the cruiser. She opened the rear door. Cuffs off. Right now. Simmons didn't move immediately. Right now, Okafor repeated. One word. Final. He walked to the cruiser, reached in, unlocked the restraints. Deshawn stepped out slowly. He rubbed his wrists once. Then he crouched down as Camille broke from her mother and ran straight into him, both arms wrapping around his neck, face buried against his shoulder. Neither of them said anything for a moment, because sometimes the only language available is just holding on. Behind them, cameras zoomed closer. Because the story had just flipped entirely. Okafor turned back to Simmons. Her voice was professional. Every word was precise. Walk me through probable cause. He looked at Camille, then at Deshawn. The visual discrepancy. She stopped him. The visual difference between a black father and his biracial daughter is not probable cause for child abduction. It is not an abduction indicator. It is not reasonable suspicion under any standard. She paused. What it is going to be the subject of a formal review beginning tonight. Dominique spoke next. Her voice was steady but carrying. You did not verify the ID properly. You did not call the pharmacy. You did not run family records. You did not do anything except look at them and decide. She looked at Deshawn, holding Camille. You assumed, and then you acted on that assumption as if it were fact. The officer didn't answer, because there is no procedural defense for assumption dressed up as instinct. Okafor reached toward Simmons and tapped his body cam. You understand this has been recording the entire time. Yes, and you are aware that civilian cameras have been recording as well. Simmons glanced at the crowd. Phones everywhere. Some people had been live streaming for the past 20 minutes. His silence was its own answer. Okafor exhaled slowly. She then spoke clearly and loudly enough for the cameras to capture every word. For the record, there is no evidence of abduction. Guardian verification has been confirmed. Subject was detained without sufficient probable cause. This incident is now under formal departmental review. Those words landed like a legal stamp. Public. Documented. Final. Deshawn stood with Camille in his arms and spoke. Not loudly. Not with heat. But clearly enough for everyone to hear. You humiliated me in front of my child. You accused me of kidnapping my own daughter. You ignored proof that was standing directly in front of you. And you did all of it because of how we look. Simmons said nothing. Okafor looked between them and said quietly, This incident is now under review. You will have badge numbers and body cam preservation before you leave this park today. Because this was no longer a misunderstanding. This was liability, recorded from multiple angles. Audio clean and unambiguous. A child's testimony audible on 6 different devices. And racial bias not implied, stated explicitly in the officer's own words on his own body cam. As Deshaun carried Camille back toward their car, the crowd that had once watched in stunned silence watched now in something different. Acknowledgement, support, the quiet recognition that they had just witnessed something that should never have happened, and that this time, unlike too many other times, every second of it was on tape. Now here is what happened next, because the story doesn't end when the cuffs come off. In some ways, that's where it really begins. The investigation started before the park even cleared. When an incident involved a child, a wrongful detention, documented allegations connected to race, and multiple recordings from civilian devices, departments do not get the luxury of moving at their own pace. Bodycam footage was pulled that same afternoon. Civilian videos began flooding the internal affairs inbox within hours. Multiple angles, multiple audio tracks, every word preserved, unedited, impossible to walk back. By Monday morning, Officer Brett Simmons was on administrative suspension. Badge surrendered. Firearm turned in. System access revoked. The official notice cited detainment without probable cause, failure to verify guardianship documentation, and conduct unbecoming of an officer. But internally, inside the review file that would never be made fully public, the real charge sat in straightforward language. Bias-driven enforcement. Because the footage didn't show poor judgment in the moment. It showed a conclusion formed before a single fact was checked and then defended against every piece of evidence that contradicted it. The department held a press briefing 3 days later. Not because they wanted to, because the footage had already been seen by millions of people and the pressure from the community and for national media made silence impossible. The chief stood at the podium and said that what occurred in that park did not reflect departmental standards. The public response was direct. People weren't reacting to policy language. They were reacting to what they saw. A father in cuffs, a child screaming, an officer who looked at a matching ID and decided it wasn't enough. Internal Affairs closed the investigation in just under 6 weeks. Fast-tracked because of the civil rights dimensions of the case. Their findings were not complicated. No probable cause existed at any point during the stop. Identification was presented and disregarded. Escalation to physical restraint was premature and procedurally unsupported. Statements recorded on Bodycam audio were consistent with racially motivated assumption rather than evidence-based enforcement. The recommendation was single and direct. Termination. Officer Brett Simmons was fired. His law enforcement certification was flagged with the state licensing board, which effectively closed the door not just on this department, but on future employment in law enforcement across the state. 6 years of service. Gone. Not with a transition or a farewell, with a flag on a permit file. But administrative discipline was only one part of what followed, because civil court was next. 2 months after the park, Deshaun and Dominique Calloway filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. Their legal team brought 4 main claims: wrongful detention, violation of constitutional rights under the 4th and 14th Amendments, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and racial profiling resulting in documented psychological harm to a minor child. The subpoenas covered everything. Bodycam archives, all dispatch audio from that day, officer training records, prior complaint history, performance evaluations, department policy on guardianship verification stops. And when the prior records came back, 2 previous complaints against Simmons surfaced. Both involved unfounded suspicion stops on black men in public spaces. Both had been previously dismissed as inconclusive. They were not inconclusive anymore. The city moved towards settlement before the case reached trial. Their own legal risk assessment was stark. Jury sympathy was rated as extremely high. Video evidence was described internally as overwhelming. Child testimony was flagged as emotionally devastating and highly compelling to a jury. And racial bias indicators were not implied in the evidence. They were stated explicitly in the officer's recorded words. Taking this to open court wasn't a legal strategy. It was a disaster waiting to be made public. The settlement finalized at $2.4 million, allocated across emotional damages, civil rights violation compensation, legal fees, and long-term counseling provisions specifically designated for Camille. But Deshaun said the same thing in every interview that followed. The money was never the point. The money was the consequence. The point, the actual point, was what this cost his daughter. Because 6 months after that Saturday, Camille was still flinching when police cars drove past. She was still asking questions at random moments that no 6-year-old should have to ask. Once, in a grocery store parking lot, she grabbed Deshaun's hand, looked up at him, and said, "You won't get in trouble for taking me here, right?" She was 6 years old, and she needed reassurance that her father was allowed to be her father in public. That is what bias-driven enforcement does to a child who did nothing wrong. That is the cost that no settlement number erases. And that is the part of these stories that gets lost when the conversation moves too quickly to the legal outcome. The department implemented policy changes in the aftermath of the case. Mandatory guardianship verification protocol was completely overhauled. Bias recognition training was added as a continuing annual requirement. De-escalation certification became mandatory rather than optional. Family identification procedures were updated across the entire department. Because lawsuits change policy in ways that internal memos and good intentions never quite managed to. As for Simmons, his name left the department roster, but the footage didn't leave anywhere. It lives now in training rooms and legal databases and in the archives of civil rights organizations across the country. A 6-year career that ended not with retirement, but as a case study, shown to new officers alongside one question: at what point should he have stopped? And the answer, every time, is the same. Before he ever crossed that park, before he opened his mouth, before he decided, based on nothing but appearance, that a man couldn't possibly be the father of his own child. 1 year later, on a Saturday in early October, Deshaun Calloway took Camille back to Riverside Park. She held his hand in the parking lot, tight, the way she'd been doing since that day. But as they walked the path toward the lower pond, she loosened her grip a little. The ducks were at the water's edge. The vendor cart was near the east entrance. The same bench sat in the same spot under the same tree. She ran ahead toward the water and turned around with both arms out. "Come on, Daddy." Deshaun walked toward her. No cruiser idling in the service lane. No officers scanning from across the grass. No weight hanging in the air between them. Just a father and his daughter and the ducks and the clean October light coming low through the trees. After a while, she looked up at him, lemonade in her hand, this time not spilled. "Daddy, yeah? I'm not scared today." He crouched down to her level. "I know, Bug. Is that okay?" He smiled at her. "It's better than okay." And they stayed at the park until the light started to go low over the water. Because they could. Because no one was going to stop them. Because that afternoon belonged to them, the way it always should have. This was the Calloway case. This is what accountability looks like when everything is recorded and nothing is buried, and a family refuses to let a moment like that pass without consequence. If you made it to the end of this video, I need 2 things from you. First, leave a comment below and tell me which moment in this story hit you the hardest. I read every single comment. Every one. Second, if you have not subscribed yet, do it right now. I am building life or death Bodycam to 1,000 subscribers, one story at a time. One case at a time. One family at a time. Every subscriber tells the algorithm that stories like this one deserve to be seen. That accountability deserves an audience. You're not just pressing a button. You're making sure the next family story reaches someone who needed to hear it. Subscribe, share this video, and I will see you in the next one.